Good morning, everybody. My name is Christopher Frankland, and I am the founder of InsurTech 360 and the Chief Innovation Officer with CareBridge International. It's an absolute delight to have all of you here today tuning in for today's session, Progress Over Perfection, Building the Best Digital Claims Journey. Couple of quick thoughts before we kick on. It's been a challenging year, and as we move closer towards 2021, a couple of weeks from now, I know we're all really thinking about what can we do differently in 2021 and how can we respond to what we've seen this year. How can we come together as a global community and respond with products and solutions in the industry that really help us recover from this situation. The focus for today's discussion is really around the claims journey. In terms of looking at the insurance life cycle as a journey, the claims stop on that journey is really the most emotional and impactful point of contact with the customer. And really it's the point on that journey that defines the industry and kind of gives us the opportunity to engage more effectively with the hearts and minds of the customer. So today I'm joined by a terrific panel, a group of esteemed industry leaders who are going to be sharing their thoughts and their kind of vision around how to deliver that best digital claims journey and experience. A few quick intros here. We have Evan Scarponi, the Chief Claims Officer with Prudential Financial. We have Michael Nadel, the AVP of Business Relationship Management and Innovation with CNA Insurance. Jorey Chernett, the CEO of Authentic 4D, and Lauren Brown, the Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships, Compex Legal Services. Evan, I would like to start with you this morning. Perhaps you can talk a little bit about how Prudential have been approaching the claims journey and kind of rethinking the claims experience. Perhaps in particular, you can touch upon how you have leveraged technology to drive a kind of a more efficient and effective claims experience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chris, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. I hope you're all doing well. First of all, thanks to Reuters for hosting the event, and thanks to all of you for attending. I always enjoy these conversations because I end up learning things and thinking about our business from a different perspective based on the insights from my fellow panelists and questions that are raised along the way. In my role with Prudential, I lead the claims organization within our group insurance division. And that includes absence management, short-term disability, long-term disability, group life, and group waiver premium. So our team of claim professionals, clinical and vocational experts, and support staff provide service to individuals who are covered under employer and association group policies. And really our mission is to deliver benefit experiences that create and protect financial wellness. And as a broader organization, our purpose is to make lives better by solving the financial challenges of our changing world. And Chris, as you said, clearly 2020 has been an example where the world has changed dramatically. And that's a purpose statement that was developed prior to the pandemic, and it certainly resonates today. We've seen tremendous change, and the financial challenges that individuals and families are facing are really more critical than ever. So the reason that the topic of progress over perfection really resonates with me is for a couple of reasons. First is the pandemic has forced us to think differently and to be more flexible in the face of rapidly shifting customer needs and macro trends. We have to deliver improvements in a more agile fashion and in a way that will allow us to test and then gather feedback, tweaking our solution and ensuring that they're designed with the end customer in mind. To me, that's a very different way of thinking for our industry, and it's a welcome change that I think will lead to continued improvements for our customers over time. So when I think about progress over perfection, as industry professionals, we should really consider how we can balance risk management and innovation in a way where the two can coexist, and I believe they can. If we want to create these kinds of digital experiences that match the expectations consumers have from other industries that they operate within and interact with, then our industry really needs to abandon some of those old assumptions and in an effort to fundamentally alter the experience that we deliver to the market. So there are a couple of reasons why I think that's really important right now in terms of executing and optimizing a digital experience. And I think this gets to an example that you had asked about, Chris. So first, as consumers of any product or service, I think we're all seeking simplicity and ease. And insurance claims and transactions are no exception to that. In fact, I think they're even more important in many respects because they're highly personal. So when you think about group insurance, the space that we operate within at Prudential, we're talking about things like losing a loved one or experiencing an illness or injury, worrying about job protection or welcoming a new child into the world. So the range of emotions that are associated with those moments in people's lives are really intense. And we have to be here as insurance professionals to help people in those times of need. As someone personally who's had claims and interactions with insurance carriers in my own personal life, I want things to be as streamlined as possible. I want them to be as efficient as possible. And I want our customers to experience a level of care and empathy that I would want myself and that I would expect my family and friends to receive. So that's one, pivotal reason why I see this work as more important than ever before. And the second reason is that the pandemic has really emphasized the need to implement quick technology enhancements to provide real-time help to customers. One example of that is at Prudential, we streamlined our intake process for COVID-19 related disability and absence claims early on in the pandemic. And in doing so, we were able to reduce the number of questions we asked at point of intake, shift from a largely telephone-driven process to a web-based process, leading to faster decisions and payments for customers during the first wave of the pandemic. And now we're employing similar steps as we tackle another rise in cases across the U.S. So clearly, we have to implement longer-term transformations to legacy systems, and that can be complex and require multi-year projects and planning. But it's important that in parallel, we're continuing to prioritize some of those short-term improvements that we can make on the fly and then iterate on in relative real time. So in closing, I'd say that 2020 has provided a prime example of how quickly and unexpectedly challenges can arise for our customers and for all of us, and how quickly circumstances can change. So pursuing progress over perfection is vital so that we can implement the kinds of solutions that our customers are looking for, really in an effort to make things easier. So thank you again for having me today. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and now I'll pass it over to Jorey.
Thank you, Evan, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Jorey Chernett. I'm founder and CEO of Authentic 4D. I'm going to briefly share my screen here. I'll see if I can figure that out. Bear with me. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so there we go. So, when we talk about progress over perfection, I think it's a fitting topic because there's a lot of information in a claims process that can add pretty material value, or let's in better terms, can substantially influence the resolution of a claim and really improve the ability to make better decisions more confidently. In our case, and one of the topics we're going to talk about this morning is the films, the actual medical images themselves. What we've seen across the industry, and we work across auto, GL, workers' compensation, about 80% of the time, anytime you have a fellowship-trained, subspecialized radiologist review the films, clinically speaking, they can look at the films and clearly ascertain from visual indicators native to the films themselves Is this a legitimate claim, a claim that's clearly connected to trauma, acute in nature, et cetera, or are there visual indicators native to the scan that are consistent with pre-existing chronic degenerative conditions? So the films themselves can provide no shortage of valuable information that can improve risk management, can help you confirm legitimate injuries maybe earlier in the process and avoid unnecessary litigation, unnecessary expenses. And on the other end of the spectrum, if it's obvious from the films that it's an exaggerated or pre-existing injury claim, then you really have the confidence to know, hey, this is a claim worth defending and investing in that. So review and resolve really comes back to the films themselves. So that's really what we're going to talk about over the next couple minutes here. Key metric that I mentioned at the outset is fellowship trained subspecialized radiologist is very different than a general radiologist. We work across all lines of casualty, as I mentioned, and this doesn't matter whether it's a comp claim, whether it's a GL or an auto claim, the same logic holds true. When you think about a subspecialized radiologist, on average, they're going to have an incremental 2 years of academic training and getting their fellowship. They're going to have subspecialized expertise, going very deep in a particular field or particular type of anatomy. A neuroradiologist with respect to spine, neck, head-related matters, a musculoskeletal radiologist with respect to maybe knees and shoulders. But that certain element to the training, for example, where as they're going through a fellowship that maybe a general radiologist doesn't have, a good example of that would be working with orthopedic surgeons as they're going through their fellowship, making a call on a particular maybe tear that they see, and then that call gets confirmed during a particular surgery. So it's an example of part of the training that subspecialized has that maybe a general radiologist doesn't. We see across the board, on average, in the clinical studies, not just in this industry, but clinical studies across just healthcare in general, on average, there's about a 30 to 35% diagnostic accuracy differential between having a general radiologist versus fellowship trained subspecialized. So it really matters. Think about it this way. If you're going to have brain surgery, God forbid, would you rather have a general surgeon perform the surgery or a fellowship trained, subspecialized or brain surgeon, call it neurosurgeon, et cetera? So our network, very briefly, breadth, depth, cover the entire country. So always having a radiologist that's licensed in the state the claim is filed in, always typically resides in that state or a contiguous state. Blind reads, very important in terms of the integrity of the overall process, having an expert that has no idea who they're reading for. So each and every time they're reviewing a film, they don't know if this is who it's referred by, whether it's a carrier, employer, whether it's a plaintiff attorney, completely blind reads. And then also real doctors in the sense that these are experts that work clinically, where at minimum 90%, and in practice, 98% of the work they perform is coming from outside of the industry. So safe to say, no one risks their medical license or their incomes to ever tell anyone what they want to hear, essentially diffusing the proverbial hired gun argument. So the process, briefly, it's fast, it's affordable. It's 48 hours from the time any 4D provider, whether it's us or someone else, receives the films and the original radiology report, reviews the films, gets back to the client. It's pretty economical as well. On average in this industry, it's a couple $100 to have this review done. And again, the objectivity and the expertise associated with the read. The visual piece, which I want to kind of wrap up with a discussion of this, visuals are very important. Most human beings are visual learners. About 70% of us are. So when you think about a traditional injury claim, and again, regardless of the line of casualty insurance, it's not uncommon to have someone that says, hey, I was asymptomatic before, now I'm symptomatic. Yet, maybe you don't have a predative loss scan, which we see 85, 90% of the time, our clients do not have a predative loss scan. So you're kind of stuck in a battle of the experts. Someone's saying there's exacerbation, but you have very normal looking spine. And it ends up being, again, a war over words. So knowing that most humans are visual learners, a way to combat that is to combine a written report from a radiologist combined with a visual. This is technology that's been used for 25 years across nearly all 5,500 registered hospitals in the United States, FDA-approved technology. So in short, part of this whole process, visually speaking, is psychologically, there's a psychological component, that knowing that most plaintiff attorneys are operating on a contingency fee basis, meaning every penny and every minute they put into the claim is coming out of their own pocket. So if you can dent one's confidence, demonstrate you're prepared to take a claim the distance by tipping your hand by saying, hey, this is an exhibit, even if it's used pre-suit or early in litigation, that can be beneficial. So what we're showing here, by the way, the claimant is in the middle. This was called an annular tear. On the far right, this is an anonymous MRI of what a real annular tear were to look like. You can see where my mouse is, this red dot right there, which we're flashing in red, up above abnormal bright signal indicative of acute injury. So this is an example of a visual indicator consistent with trauma. On the left is an anonymous scan of someone in the same age bracket of the claimant, but in a normal state. So I'm going to hit play. You're going to see here's what a real annular tear looks like on the far right. The middle is the claimant, and you can see the absence of such or the lack thereof. So this is all 2D. We're only using the most important 2D views that any expert would rely upon. So that was the sagittal view. And then briefly, you can see this bright white strip on the right. This is another 2D view, the axial view. This is what a real annular tear would look like on the right. And then in the middle, even though they're claiming there's an annular tear, there's clearly not. You can see the absence of such or lack thereof. So high level, that's how that works. There's a report that comes with that, always. It's fully admissible. So part of the whole service in the 4D space, this category is helping folks pay what they owe, improving risk management, confirming legitimate injuries, but then of course from the images, understanding when to push back and really empowering folks with a stronger leg to stand on with a visual combined with the report. So with that, I'm gonna stop share and I'm gonna turn it over at this point, I believe, to Lauren.
So I think Michael, you might be up next. Lauren,
I apologize.
No, it's okay, Jorey. Thank you for that.
No worries. Yeah, thank you. My name is Michael Nadel. I'm a part of the Business Relationship Management and Innovation team at CNA. And so I'm going to give a little bit of my perspective on kind of claim digitization and innovation and really where that progress over perfection title kind of comes in and what that really means to me. So when I think about the insurance experience, to me, it really bubbles down into kind of two things from a customer perspective. It's the buying experience, and then it's the experience at the point of claim. And I think as Evan touched on, the claim experience is a very emotional one for a lot of people. And it's one that people remember when they interact with insurance carriers. And so creating a great claim experience is a way to create a real competitive advantage from an insurance carrier perspective. And that, from my perspective, there's really two ways in which the claimant really feels these changes. One is what I'll call front-end changes, and the other is back-end changes. So these front-end changes are things, to me, that are really transparent to the customer and things that they can really interact with and feel. So this might be changes that you make to your applications or to your websites. And when they interact at point A and it looks different at point B, they can tell. It's very transparent to them that you've made changes. The other are back-end changes, and these are things that we can do either to streamline processes on the back end or things that we do with our people and culture, which impact the customer, but in a way that they might not necessarily know that it's even happening, but it could shorten the claim experience or the time to payment or that general experience. I think that companies can really orient themselves around this kind of way of thinking in three different ways to really extract a lot of value for both the carrier and for the claimant. And that's to think about it in terms of people, process, and technology. From a technology standpoint, in an area that I play in a lot, I think there's really a massive dichotomy in this area. And that's around, and which is probably no surprise to the folks in this webinar, is the amount of legacy technology that exists in the insurance industry, and combining that with the emerging technology that is now coming into our space around AI, telematics, blockchain. I mean, if you name a buzzword, it's coming into our industry. And the question is, how do you marry these two things together to really create that value again for the customer, and then in turn drive value for the insurance carrier? And so, when I think about legacy technology, I often hear people say, well, you need to replace your legacy technology in order to capitalize on these emerging technologies and the capabilities that are out there. And I think the conversation warrants a little bit more thought to it. One perspective that insurance carriers can take around replacing legacy technology is to understand the processes and the products in which it supports, and how transparent those processes are to the end customer. For example, the process around a claim for an auto policy might be a whole lot more transparent and simple than it is for a D&O policy. And as a result, you might want to consider replacing a legacy technology that supports an auto policy because it is so transparent to a customer. But for something like a D&O policy, where the claim could take years and years to settle, and might have more processing on the corporate side, you might want to consider maybe like putting a wrapper around some of these legacy technologies. And the importance around this concept is, when you can make these important financial decisions around your legacy technology, you can in turn then put that ROI that you make back into replacing this technology over time. So the best decisions you can make up front impact your decisions that you can make along the way. I think, there's other further conversation around, do you even need to replace your legacy technology at all? There's conversations around service-oriented architecture or microservice architecture, where you could take a legacy application and break it into 100 different pieces and all the things that you use it for, and then have your other applications integrate with those sub-services. So in a way, you can still get the value out of your systems and enable new capabilities without wholesale replacing legacy systems, which, as Evan mentioned, is a multi-year journey, very expensive. And so it's not something to be taken lightly. From a process perspective, and I think Evan also touched on this in the beginning of his conversation, the ability to process specific friction-heavy tasks not only benefits the insurance carrier, but benefits the claimant in shortening that experience. For example, if you're able to get a claim to the right claim handler more quickly, it's a better experience for the client and can result in a shorter time to claim. There's a lot of value to be unlocked for both the claimant and the insured by automating those processes. I think there's also something to be said around the process of engaging with insurtechs in general from a commercial perspective. Insurtechs are often smaller companies, and when they get put into the mix of working with large insurance carriers, we have lots of very heavy processes, which make it slower to get a proof of concept or proof of value to the market in text and be able to test that progress over perfection. So if you can think about internally the way that you engage with these companies and streamline the process in which we engage with these insurtechs, we can bring more value to market more quickly and test things out and iterate on those concepts, as Evan mentioned, and really get the value out there. I think the last thing that I would talk about is really the way that companies focus on their people and culture aspect. It's one thing to talk about being digital and innovative, but to truly bring those concepts to market, you really need to live and breathe it. And living and breathing those concepts and orienting your company around those concepts also brings in the right talent that you need to deliver those capabilities. So I think if companies focus on really those three kind of pillars and some of the subcomponents within, they can unlock a lot of the value for both the insurance company and for the claimant, and can do it in an iterative way that really, as the title of this webinar says, can bring progress over perfection. So with that, I think I will officially pass over to Lauren.
Thank you, Michael.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships for Compex. And in an innovation role, I'm responsible for working with our carrier partners to identify and deliver efficiencies and customer experience enhancements. I recently led our integrations with both Guidewire and Duck Creek. And a little over a year ago, led our integration with Authentic 4D, who's also here on our panel today. And in my years in this role and through working with 18 of the top 20 carriers, I've had a front row seat to the digital evolution that's taking place. And building on what Michael just shared within the claims journey, you can impact the customer through faster resolution or through a better experience. Compex focuses on supporting faster resolution by the adjuster. Every step of our journey focuses on saving the adjuster both time and lowering the adjuster touch. Every step of our journey focuses on saving the adjuster time and touch. And for example, when creating an order, we have pre-populated order forms, saving the adjuster an average of 15 minutes per an order, which may not seem like much, but when you think of how many orders an adjuster places on average per year, that really adds up. Another example is that we provide the adjuster medical summaries and the ability to quickly and securely share records and films digitally with third parties, such as IMEs and law firms. And then within that solution, our DICOM viewer, which is a film viewer, is built in, and that eliminates the need for the adjusters to receive or send films on discs, which has been, a huge hurdle, I think, for a lot of adjusters during the pandemic. So these tools lead to a faster path to insight, which leads to a faster claims resolution, which then results in a better customer experience, which is what we've all been focusing on talking about here today. So empowering the adjuster with a faster path to insight means the adjuster can focus on creating a more delightful customer journey and a more efficient one. So to do this, we have leveraged advanced technology through our own internal processes, and we have invested over $8 million in the last 2 years building out our own operating platform to better leverage both humans and technology. And we've incorporated AI, machine learning, automation, a smart call center, and more. And this has led to freeing up our staff to focus on important steps such as ones that require human interaction. And really for us, that's building the one-to-one relationships that we have with over millions of medical providers nationally. So I think it's important to note that partnering with the right company is important, not just for the technology that they supply, but also the internal technology that will directly benefit the customer in the claims journey through speed and efficiency. And it wouldn't be a true webinar today if I didn't mention COVID. So yes, COVID has really impacted our carrier partners, and agility has never been more important. To support this, we recently released a carrier insights dashboard that allows our clients to access, assess, and analyze our data through a self-service dashboard. So this gives claims leadership access to evaluate our performance, as well as focus on metrics that our carrier clients can utilize to optimize their workflows, such as completion rates, turnaround times, and really gauge what percentage of orders are held up due to their own staff's performance or responsiveness. So a lot of great innovation that we've seen as a company alongside the carriers that we work with within this last year. Thank you again, Chris, for having me here today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you to everybody else for sharing your thoughts this morning. This is a discussion that is really close to my heart, and Evan, we heard you talk a lot about empathy for the customer, and kind of looking at the claims journey and experience as being one that perhaps is the most emotional for the insured. So I do have one quick comment. If people do have questions, please put those forwards. We have a bunch of our own, but obviously we always like to hear from the audience. So if there's anything in particular you'd like to learn from this fantastic panel, please put those forwards. Michael, you mentioned about kind of this idea of, or this concept of having kind of the customer front end facing innovation, and then the more operations focused back end side of things. And I think that's really, it's such a great point, right? Because what we're doing essentially is taking what is still a relatively friction heavy point in the insurer journey, and saying, okay, how do we streamline that? How do we use technology? How do we use people and technology to deliver a better process and a better customer experience. How do you see that going forward? And Michael, we can start with you in this, but moving into 2021, how do you see those two kind of things converging in terms of back-end operations, front-end, customer, whether it's UI or UX or customer experience facing improvements?
Yeah, I think that's a hot button question for anyone in the claims industry, right? Is that balance of changing the claim experience on the front end and streamlining on the back end, which is a win-win for everybody. I mean, I think a great example of an innovative technology that I see where it kind of bridges the gap is some of the artificial intelligence that's being used in the contact center. There's kind of two different perspectives on this, or two different ways that it's being applied. One, there's technology that's being used at the point of F&OL from an AI perspective to predict fraud. Utilizing that technology obviously has a lot of value from a back-end perspective and more value from a carrier perspective in terms of predicting fraud, reducing the amount of claims that are paid out, and shortening the time to capture that fraud. There's then kind of opportunities that present kind of bilateral value for both the customer and the carrier in terms of artificial intelligence in the contact center, where you can use AI to answer claim-based calls for things that might be more simple and you don't necessarily need to get a human involved. So there's a lot of AI out there that will take a call and can answer things like, who is my claim handler? And what is the status of my claim? And those types of technologies run 24/7. And the claimant might not even know that they're talking to, not talking to a human in that instance. And in that case, you free up time from key resources from a claim perspective, which helps to shore up some of those back-end capabilities. But we're also offering enhanced front-end capabilities to our customers by utilizing that type of technology. So there's lots of trade-offs that exist in that space.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Michael. Lauren and Jorey, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, because obviously you've both spoken about the really impressive solutions that you bring to the market and how they can help to streamline that claims experience. And Lauren, starting with you, but what are your thoughts?
Sure. So on the front end, we're focusing on the tools and the automation and just reducing the adjuster touch. And we've done this through the integrations that we recently built out with both Duck Creek and with Guidewire. We've also incorporated Authentic 4D within our order form. So with both of those solutions, we have pre-populated claim information, which I mentioned in my introduction, that the time savings there for the adjuster. So on what we would call our front end, that interaction with the adjuster, we're saving the adjuster significant, steps in their process by automating certain parts of their, record retrieval process. Additionally, we're giving them the tools to not just perform their tasks fully digitally without any discs or paper or, sending things via mail, but we're also centralizing key functions and involvements that involve record retrieval, sharing them, with third parties, and also incorporating Authentic 4D. So our order form isn't just pre-populated through that integration. We also pre-populate Authentic 4Ds. And within just a few, clicks, the adjuster is easily able to initiate orders with both Compex and Authentic 4D. So, really streamlining the process there. I think it's also important, while we're focused on claims, there is involvement with the litigated side of the business. And so making sure that the adjusters have real-time access to all the information and records, that work that's being performed on the legal side, because the adjusters are still very involved with that. And then in terms of how we help clients or carrier partners, and on our back end, I mentioned also just the steps that we've taken through automating our own processes and streamlining to find efficiencies where we can. And so during the advancements that we've made this past year as a result of COVID, we've seen internal efficiencies by up to 20%. So we're eager to see, once we move out of this COVID environment, those efficiencies, those internal efficiencies gained in the long run for our carrier partners.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Jorey, I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And also, perhaps you could talk a little bit about how you are integrating your services with the carrier, and kind of how those two pieces are playing out.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, we talk about just technology and easy things, maybe not, curing, cancer or something else, but just something easy. And that's CDs, right? So CDs, in terms of getting the films from the thousands of different healthcare providers around the country. We still live in a day and age, particularly in this industry, where the lion's share of films are being transferred physically via CD. So that's just one of those easy blocking and tackling steps where you can save weeks, months of time. So as an example, Lauren mentioned this before, Compex, they spend considerable sum of money in their technology. So there is no more CD. So anytime that we're integrating with a client, and client is leveraging the Compex Authentic 4D integration as an example, there is no CD. So essentially, you have an end-to-end process. It's completely streamlined. You have an adjuster or an attorney that places a records request on the Compex portal. They get the films, they push those to us digitally. And then, telemedicine is the other thing that's worth mentioning, because we live in a day and age, of course, with COVID, and you have IMEs that have been routinely delayed, sometimes canceled. And even in normal times, on average, it can take a couple months for an IME. So, a use case here, and not just a use case, but when you think about technology and really to benefit the actual claimant, him or herself, is the use of telemedicine. And along those lines, our service is an example, or any 4D provider, sharing that original radiologist opinion over the phone, giving actionable information in 48 hours for de minimis expense, is a way to provide valuable information that might be 90% faster than maybe a traditional IME, as an example, and also probably 90% less money. So it's an example where, okay, if it's a legitimate injury claim, we're talking about maybe a workers' compensation claim where every week it costs $500 in terms of lost wages. And, what's the right treatment protocol? Getting that right earlier in the process to help the claimant return to health, return to work faster. Great use case, particularly with digitizing everything end to end with the record retrieval all the way through. And then, to your point, Chris, the last question about integrating with carriers, we have folks that use this on an ad hoc basis. We have several folks, which has been pretty big component of our growth over the last 2.5 years. They use this in a more programmatic fashion where every claim that has imaging basically gets pushed to us digitally. So there is no CD. It saves weeks of time as well, or months of time. And again, enables a more efficient claims process.
Cool, thank you, Jorey. Yeah, no, the concept of integrating more effectively with partners is obviously something that has come up during this discussion, and there are kind of a multitude of things I'd like to touch upon, but just this concept of partnering, collaborating, integrating, working more effectively with insurtechs is something that, Michael, I know you and I talked a little bit about this. I think historically, the way that perhaps carriers have partnered and worked with insurtechs has been quite slow, right? And working for an insurtech myself, there's always a kind of a desire to want to speed things up and perhaps maybe see progress over perfection, right? That's what we're talking about here today. Michael, a question to you. I mean, how do you guys partner with insurtechs, and how do you see those partnerships evolving over 2021? I mean, are you seeing more of a kind of an experimentation type approach where perhaps you're able to test out ideas and products and services?
Yeah, I think the thought around solving problems isn't supposed to be as linear as we've treated it in the past. And I think Evan even mentioned that in the beginning of the conversation. I think the previous notion was you have a problem and you come in with a predetermined solution, and either you build that solution yourself or you find the person who can plug that gap. I think as it relates to the insurtechs, in some ways they are solving problems we may not even necessarily know are problems that we have. And so in the way that we engage with some of these folks differs kind of on the way we're approaching it. Regardless of that, I think the partnership with the InsurTech, we have to have ways of streamlining that onboarding process and having that conversation. Often some of the holdups are sharing data and data concerns and security concerns, which every large company is going to have and put in place for good reason. But how do we then create clean data sets that we can have ready on hand to test certain use cases across a number of different InsurTechs that are providing a solution to a specific set? That's a way that we can streamline the process from a carrier perspective, and we can work on some of those other processes around security and data. I mean, that stuff's not going to go away, but having the carrier be more ready to have the conversation can streamline that conversation pretty quickly.
Yeah, thank you for that, Evan. Any thoughts there? And Michael, you mentioned data, and and obviously data is one of those things that when we talk about streamlining the claims experience or any process on the insurance kind of life cycle, data obviously and accuracy of data is a key part of that. Evan, any comments from your end around kind of partnering with InsurTechs, and then also perhaps touching upon data and how you guys are approaching that?
Sure. Yeah. So I'd say on the InsurTech front, one thing that that we've learned a lot from at Prudential is with our acquisition of Assurance IQ, we've seen the two cultures come together, right? And we've seen opportunities to kind of leverage different mindsets around how we might solve similar problems, but looking at them from a very different angle. And so I think we're continuing to find that there's some really great benefits that have come from that arrangement, right? Where it's really, coordinating kind of legacy technology and ways of thinking and really products with, much new and a different approach and more innovative approach in terms of InsurTech partnerships. So, it certainly resonates just in terms of making sure that we're philosophically aligned and kind of looking at how we can operate together in this new path forward. And I think it's working very well, and we're seeing, great opportunities to provide additional solutions in the marketplace as a result of that. And then shifting, to the question around data, I think absolutely has been vital as part of our efforts to improve the experience, both on the front end and the back end, right? And one thing I'd say to on that topic is I feel like the lines are really blurred there right now more than ever, where we need to improve the employee experience and make things more efficient in order to deliver the experience to end consumers. And the way we've looked at that from data, from a data perspective specifically, has been around, leveraging things like predictive modeling. We've developed a number of models to try to predict for example, the likelihood of a short-term disability becoming a long-term disability, or the propensity of fraud, or other ways that can make things more efficient, both internally, but also drive a better customer experience for individuals and for employers. So, I think harnessing the data across our ecosystem and in partnership with InsurTechs and other vendors who we work with has really been a nice mix and a nice blend to bring some of those technologies to bear.
Cheers, Evan. Thank you. Lauren, over to you. How can InsurTechs partner more effectively in 2021?
Great. So I think partnership when it comes to technology is important, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then partnership on the data front as well. I can elaborate there as well. So on the technology front, Compex takes the partnership approach in all of our carrier relationships. We innovate alongside our carrier clients to resolve pain points in a lot of their processes, not just the ones that are focused solely on record retrieval. So some examples of recent innovations driven by our carrier partners include that dashboard, that carrier insights dashboard that I've mentioned, the customized medical summary packages that we provide. We even put together an ROI program for one of our largest carrier clients to manage their own in-house release of records department. So, these are all great examples of carrier pain points that drove us to deliver innovative solutions that created efficiencies and a faster path to insight for our clients. We believe in innovating collaboratively with other insurtechs. So we have several large clients that, they encourage us to work with other partners that they have. They make the introduction, and, it's kind of like a little bit of like a round table that we form, together as a team. A great example of this is our relationship with Authentic 4D. So again, by integrating our whole process with them, we have several large carrier clients that Jorey mentioned we have that programmatic approach with. So I think just having that really inclusive, collaborative approach has been very successful for us. The other point that I wanted to drive was collaboration on data. So I mentioned that carrier insights dashboard, which is really important to show the carriers, okay, here's how we're improving our process focused solely on record retrieval with you, but then also give them a whole nother set of data that's just raw data, that's metadata, that's transmitted to them real time, that helps contribute to the larger picture that some of the carriers are trying to paint when it comes to data. So I think, supplying both types of data is really important.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I like the connection with the bigger picture, right? Because I think we all know data on its own is really not worth a whole lot until you give it context, until you integrate it into a story, or you can tell a story that resonates with the carrier or with the customer. Jorey, from Authentic 4D's point of view, I mean, what type of metrics or analytics are you kind of providing to carriers to help them with their claims experience?
Yeah, I'll kind of say it's the proverbial, what if question. What if, for example, you could understand as a carrier, across any line of insurance, what are the good facilities? What are the imaging centers that have upper echelon imaging equipment? Or who are the radiologists that do a good job, or perhaps not? And it's not necessarily a fraud thing. Sometimes it can be inflationary and auto claims, but a lot of times it's a gap in expertise. So, as an example, and maybe I'll just bring up briefly a brief couple, visuals here. So let's see if I'm more efficient this time sharing than I was last time. So here we go, share. All right, so, we track and have been doing this for years. Did we agree or disagree? So when you think about this industry, 60–70% nationally of all films are being read by general radiologists, not just in auto and workers' comp, but across the entire country at hospitals, et cetera. And again, clinically, there's a big difference between a specialist versus a generalist. So, this is an example of a dashboard, an excerpt from it where we track, for example, every single facility. So we get let's say 1,000 claims from a client over X month period. We track the original facility, the original radiologist. Did we agree, disagree? And then we can provide metrics like this, where here's the top 15 treating facilities. I tried to protect the innocent and block out some of the names, but this is real data, and our clients get this on a monthly basis. Top 15 facilities that we disagree with, top 15 radiologists that we disagree with. It can be broken out however one sees fit. It can be top 50, there's a backup with a spreadsheet. So this is robust data. When you think about the continuum of care as well, and you think about the 80-20 rule, those 20% of claims that lead to 80% of your expense, it's not uncommon that some of the bad actors that exist, whether it be facilities or individual radiologists, that it starts with that maybe inflationary read or that wrong read that maybe leads to that injection to maybe an unnecessary surgery. At the end of the day, it's the claimant that loses out most, that's being essentially taken advantage of. But this is the type of metrics and data that can lead to predictive modeling, that with collaboration with SIU, you can really nip some of these facilities in the bud, or even just maybe they're not necessarily bad actors, they're just maybe not good at what they do, lower quality imaging or general radiologists. So those are folks that maybe you need to dig deeper into when you get claims from them. So just an example of the types of things that are available.
Yeah, Jorey, thank you. And again, I think what you're adding to the equation is greater transparency, right? Over data, over that journey. And obviously that does bubble up into a more satisfactory, hopefully a more satisfactory customer experience at the end of the day. We only have 10 minutes left, which is bonkers. I'm going to get to some audience questions, and we've got a few good ones coming in here. So I'm going to kind of open this up to everybody to comment on. But one from Joseph Roman. What are the biggest areas that you feel will need to be automated inside of the claims process? Michael, we can kick off with you, man. It's a fairly broad question.
Yeah, it is pretty broad. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff, that obviously is ripe for automation, but I look at those really kind of friction-heavy processes that involve a lot of manual and kind of repetitive type of tasks that take a lot of time and necessarily don't create a ton of downstream value. Those types of things that you can find and either apply solutions, long-term automation, or maybe RPA kind of stopgap type solutions for really create a lot of internal value in terms of removing some of that, friction heavy work internally, but then also, speed up that process for the claimant.
Thank you. Evan, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the more efficient we can make things for, employees and in the claims process, I think that has a direct link to, faster decisions, faster payments, and freeing up time internally to really focus on what, our employees do best, which is really provide and deliver empathy, manage risk. So anything we can do to remove some of those, repetitive processes and transactions, I would agree with Michael. I think that's probably, the biggest area of opportunity. But then, the other I'd point to is from a front end perspective, and a consumer standpoint, what are the transactions that we can just really simplify? And, particularly when it comes to things that require lengthy forms and, data being provided to us, if we can glean that through, leveraging third-party information, really getting at the root of what's required as opposed to what's nice to have. I think those areas will also help to automate, both the employee back-end experience and the consumer experience.
Thanks. Jorey, Lauren, any thoughts around that? I mean, what are you guys looking at for next year in terms of automating within the claims journey?
I think for me, just briefly going back to what I mentioned before, you look at the industry and, for the last 6 years, we've been doing second opinions, right? So in the absence of any sort of digital integration, you live in a world with CDs. So it's amazing because like on a comp claim, it could take 6 weeks to get a CD to go from a provider to a network provider to a Sedgwick or the TPA over to the second opinion company. So, for us as an example of something for next year, we launched actually in the fourth quarter, is a network, our own network, where, it's no longer just a second opinion. It could be a first opinion on a workers' comp claim, where we have digital connectivity with the entire country of facilities. I think a lot of it goes back to expertise. And just to finish up here, for example, since we're talking about workers' comp, we do a lot of auto as well, but in comp, you don't have a lot of healthcare, teleradiology expertise in the industry. So I think part of it is, happens to be more of the roots of our business, but I think part of it is, to create automation, particularly when you're dealing, in our case, with medical records and medical opinions. You need to bring in the right expertise, and maybe it's not a focus on transactions and volume, but it's more focused on the technology, expertise, et cetera, and holistically bringing it all together.
Brilliant, thank you. Lauren, any comments?
Yeah, I think for me, I think that there's a good opportunity in 2021 for us to further automate key functions of those integrations that we have with Guidewire and Duck Creek. Guidewire just released, I think they're calling it Guidewire Autopilot, where they're adding another layer of claims automation. There's Snapsheet out there. There's all these other insurtechs that are offering automation in their claims process. So I think we're eager to see, how we can partner in that process to streamline things even further. I also think that, and while it's tricky to have, you know, IT prioritization of integrations, I think that there's still a really big opportunity for our carrier partners to integrate further, not just upfront with the ordering process on the claim side, but also transferring, you know, the records and films directly into their document management platforms, partnership with other insurtechs, and collaborate further. That's where I see the most opportunity in 2021.
Brilliant, thank you, Lauren. And I like this question. I mean, we've talked a lot, you know, a lot about technology today. You know, where kind of, you know, AI, machine learning, perhaps is impacting the our ability to create more sophisticated solutions. Where do we think that AI and machine learning cannot go, right? I mean, you know, we've also talked a lot about empathy and needing people to deliver, you know, empathy, you know, particularly within the claims journey. But, you know, what are those points where perhaps technology is going to struggle to make an impact, and we'll still need to rely on people, we'll still need that personal connection to make a difference? Evan, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly, you know, empathy and emotion and building those connections with individuals, I think is, you know, probably the biggest piece that I don't think will be automating, or the technology will be solving for anytime soon. But, you know, in addition to that, I think it's just the culture of innovation, right? In order to identify additional opportunities for improvement, we need to rely on folks who are interacting with customers day to day and can really, you know, highlight those areas of opportunity and identify what's getting in the way of an even better experience. So I think there are some ways that you can, you know, utilize data and leverage technology to identify improvement opportunities. But I think the best ideas come from people who are on the front lines and, you know, really at the tip of the spear in terms of interaction with customers. So I just see that as another area that is really critical to the cultures that we create, and, you know, making sure that we can continue to look for opportunities to innovate over time.
Cool. Thanks, Evan. And you know what, this 3 minutes to go. This is kind of a wrap up, I guess. Michael, any thoughts around that, and any closing thoughts?
No, I would agree with that 100%. I mean, we have an innovation and collaboration platform that we use internally to capture those types of ideas exactly, which I don't think you can rely on a machine to do a good job of capturing the human, you know, experience like a human can. I think there's also something to be said about using data and using data and trusting AI and ML to 100% degree certainty. So while it's a great add-on to doing data analysis, the level of data granularity that exists, you can't 100% always rely on AI and ML. I mean, I think there's tons of examples about zip code level data and street level data, and how, you know, one house on the end of one street might be impacted by rain completely differently from another. And if you use an AI ML model to automate 100% of decision making, you might end up, you know, making a wrong decision. So I think the role of the claim handler and adjuster is something that can never be fully automated, but it can be augmented with AI and ML for sure.
Cool, thank you. And well, one last word from you, Lauren and Jorey, before we wrap up.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's important anytime you're developing anything from a technology perspective to engage all major, you know, key constituents along the way, along each node of the process. And at the same time, you know, it's that nexus between technology and key constituents. You know, you don't want to just only focus on the technology and end up with, you know, mousetrap myopia, where you have something that is really neat, but maybe doesn't have commercial or, you know, any sort of just pragmatic application. So I think having that combination of the two is critical, as you know, Evan and Michael had pointed out.
Thanks, Jorey.
And I'll just lastly, I'll build on that. What everyone has been saying, you know, 100%, there's definitely going to be steps in our process that require that human interaction. And I mentioned earlier the one-to-one relationships that we've built with, you know, millions of medical providers nationally. That's not something that can be automated. You know, that's something that we're going to continue to build through human interaction. but there's certainly a lot of things we can automate.
No, that's a global effort. It's all about people and kind of coming together as a community to drive that experience. Thank you, everybody. One really quick reminder: Compex and A4D will be holding a workshop in January, kind of showcasing the integration opportunities. Jorey and Lauren, I know that's something you guys are putting on. So if anybody is interested, please reach out to them to find out a bit more information about that. So again, thank you everybody for attending today. To the panelists, thank you. To Reuters Events, thank you very much for this. Terrific discussion, and I'm sure we could talk for another hour quite easily. But all right, everybody, thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.